Witchers, welcome back to the Witcher Lorecast. This is your host, Tom, or Robots. I'm here with my good buddy, Toasty of Not Toaster. I can't keep up with your names, Toasty.
I think I haven't changed in a while. Is it just Not Toasty of Not Here still?
I think maybe that is, but yeah, it's right on. Yeah, whatever. Anyway, welcome back, everybody. We've got our patrons because it is time to talk with our patrons for the end of January 2023 already. We're already a 12th. That's the right number of the way through the year. That's crazy. And we've got some patrons here to join us. We have Crow joining us again. Crow, what's up? How's it going, man?
Hey, not too bad. I paused Smallville to be on here.
Well, thank you for putting us as a higher priority than Smallville. We've got Ben of Temeria also joining us again. Hey, Ben.
Hello. Good to be back.
Yeah, welcome back. And Genesis with her cat.
The cat is always here.
The cat is always here. And this week we are discussing, because we haven't had a chance to talk with our patrons yet about Blood Origin, but that's what we're going to do today. You guys thought you had heard The Last of Us talking about it, but don't worry.
Good show.
You're not going to hear me and Toasty complain or talk about what we would change. Instead, we're going to hear what our patrons, well, first of all, think if they've seen it, and if they've only seen parts of it or seen things about it, they're well aware of what the complaints are, what they would actually change, and how they would manage that if they were to do it themselves. So let's get this kicked off. Who has seen it? I know some of you guys haven't seen it. Ben has seen it. Ben's raising his hand. Ben, I know you've got thoughts. You want to start us off?
Yeah, they shouldn't have made it.
They shouldn't have made it. Just like, nope. Just like, not at all.
My main thing is, if you're going to do a show for The Witcher, keep accurate to the canonical lore. Mm-hmm. But I understand making alterations because TV and whatnot. And yeah, this is a show that was, based on, events well before the books and all that. So it's all new stuff. But like they just straight up broke lore.
Yeah.
In this entire show. And
right.
It just irks me. I was like, no.
Yeah.
Like, well, there's already pre-existing stuff from the first season of the freaking standard show that they just broke.
Yeah. So I'll play devil's advocate here. But Ben, they break the lore ever since season 1. What makes this one so different? Ben's just laughing.
Let's see.
Why weren't you so upset with season 1 then, huh? Because they broke the lore back then.
Not yes and no. Like season 1 was probably the most accurate out of what we got. I mean, it was just the short stories. There's just little tweaks.
Right. Yeah. It was
very
it was more accurate to the original work.
Major changes.
Right, I agree. And Crow, feel free to chime in. Crow had some thoughts too. You want to chime in on this?
Yeah, I was just gonna kind of say that, like, I feel like what Ben was saying is the fact that they went back and broke their own lore from season 1. It's not like they're steering. I mean, they are steering well away from the books, but the fact that they've gone back and broken things that they've written themselves away from the books as well.
What are some examples of that, Ben? Like, what are things that come to mind?
Well, the whole thing about Witchers being sterile.
Right. So, yeah, one of the premise here is, and we hear it in Blood Origin of, let me tell you about the first Witcher. So now you're defining this as the first Witcher. And so therefore it is like all the other Witchers. It's just the first one, and yet isn't sterile. Right. And is also an elf. That's what you're trying to say.
The first Witcher being an elf doesn't irk me as much because, okay, that I can see because there is a elf Witcher. Mm-hmm. We do have an elven Witcher from the School of the Cat that is like legitimate. Mm-hmm. So it doesn't irk me too much on that. It's just the whole point of the whole kid thing, them having a kid, not being sterile. And it's like, okay, well, that if that's the case, that completely destroys Geralt's entire story. Was the whole point of the whole family thing with him. Oh, Genesis has words.
I do have words.
This is a small group of us, so feel free to just chime in. Let's see where this goes.
So about the whole sterility thing, and I can't believe that I'm going to go on the side of Blood Origin on here, but we know that if this was the true first Witcher, then that's the first iteration of it. Then there's generations of other Witchers. Beyond that, the mutagens have changed. The elder blood that they use to create the Witcher has also diminished over time. The magic has shifted and the world itself is different. So what happened to the first dude isn't going to be the exact same process or outcome as what happened to the most recent Witcher created.
So it's
I can
a Witcher
see that sterility wouldn't... Huh?
So to back you up on this, so it's a Witcher in idea, but not in complete mechanical function, the same way as the later ones.
Right. And that's why he looks a little bit different. That's why he gets Vampire Diary version eyes instead of how we see Geralt doing it. Mm-hmm. You know, it's because he's different. And so his sterility could also just be a mutagen of the mutagens, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Or, I mean, if you really want to play this up, something that the mages later on added in because they didn't want the Witchers to be having children all over the place. Maybe they concocted it to function that way. I mean, you come up with all sorts of different storylines as to why that is the case. But I get what you're saying. It's a Witcher in concept, but it's in the idea of mutagens and beast blood and like all these connections into a person to turn them into something more powerful than they were before. In the simplest terms, it's that as a Witcher, but not in specific terms the way they are later.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and kind of going off of that, like, again, obviously I didn't raise my hand. I haven't watched it. I don't know what process they put him through for that first iteration. But again, like Jim was saying, like, maybe back then it was something like 1 in 10 kids could be turned into Witchers instead of the 4 in 10, you know, the much greater odds we have now. So maybe it was something kind of them adding destiny or so into the formula, where if Witchers weren't able to, like, I guess, reproduce, then if they could only get children of surprises or children of destiny to become Witchers, their survival kind of went up because of the destiny factor.
Yeah, the Witcher in this version is an adult, so they're not a child. They don't go through, they call it the trial of the grasses, but really it's just they give them some potions, they do some magic stuff, and then overnight, boom, now there's something different. They're just a different thing. And that's just it. Like, there's the rest of the witchery stuff around it. It's not really the same thing. So
I don't know why my brain is so stuck on this whole sterility point, but that the fact I didn't even put the two together, that these were all prepubescent children who went through the trials. And then the first Witcher was already an adult grown man. Therefore, he had gone through testosterone-based puberty.
Right.
He had built that up while these kids hadn't. So maybe they're sterile because they never went through normal puberty.
Yeah, like it locks their bodies into a certain... But, yeah, yes, you could argue that. We could get into the nitty-gritty details of biology, but we won't go that far. So we've got that stuff. We've got the whole Witcher difference thing. We've kind of rabbit trailed from Ben, your original point of you just wouldn't have made this series at all. Do you?
Yeah, it's just, I don't know. Like, the story didn't grab me too well compared to, like, you know, season 1. Because I expected to see, like, going into like season 1 of The Witcher, based off the books and everything, I know what was going to happen, and even so, it's still wanted me to keep watching more. Mm-hmm. Blood Origins didn't do that for me. I don't know why. It just, I had to like force myself to continue watching, even though if it's only 4 episodes, it still was just dragging, and it's just like, I was not catching me. Like season 1 and season 2 of The Witcher, like I binged it within like a day.
Right.
Blood Origins, it took me like a week just to force myself to watch it.
When you mentioned that, I agree. I had the same experience. I think that there's something even knowing the stories before you saw them, or at least what would have been the stories until they started changing things a lot. But even knowing a significant amount about the way the stories go in the first 2 seasons of the regular Witcher, there was still that feeling every episode of oh, what's going to happen next? Who else might they introduce? Like, what else will we see? How will this dynamic between these 2 characters play out in the next episode? There's a lot of that, like, mystery and wondering about how they were going to do that. With this series, it became like, okay, here's all the pieces on the chessboard, and they're all like this. And pretty much what you expect to happen is probably going to happen. And if it didn't, it was more of this feeling of like, well, that was weird. Why did they do that? Like, did you guys feel the same way about that? Ben, did you have that same kind of feeling?
Oh yeah. I mean, like with like season 1 and season 2, like they did subtle changes to where it would like pique your interest. It's like, oh, well, that's a little different. Like, and then it's like end of episodes, like we'll have to watch more. This one's like, hey, here's stuff, and like next episodes, here's more stuff, and like it progresses like slowly and builds up, and it's like,
So it's kind of like we could have gotten a like a Old Republic era of Star Wars, but instead we got the Disney trilogy.
Kind of, yeah. It's kind of like that. Yeah, you could say it's something kind of like that.
I'd rather watch the Disney trilogy.
But I get the analogy you're making on that, Crow. Okay, so if we were to, Ben, in your opinion, if you were to do some sort of prequel type of like content series, and you didn't do this, what would you have done instead? Like, you can clearly tell they were trying to give us an image of like an idea of the conjunction of the spheres and some of these key points in history. How would you have handled it?
The whole like trying to like show the conjunction, but honestly, you really don't need to show that. In my point of view, like, we know the conjunction happened. We know there's monsters. Like, that's all we really need to know. We don't need to see the actual event, because it's just planes just melded together, poured a bunch of stuff in, and that's it.
Yeah, it's almost undescribable, but also not that super exciting all at the same time.
Right. So as a prequel series, honestly, what they should have done is do a prequel series of the founding of the School of the Wolf, or like just the first Witcher school, and then you see them branch off, do other schools, like the School of the Cat, School of the Griffin, which are the canon ones from the books. That's what they should have done, honestly. And like that way we see Witchers being like, the origins of how Witchers become Witchers and all that stuff in live action, but still get that prequel essence.
I gotcha. Yeah, because you're still going back to some sort of origin point for the Witchers without having to go back to the conjunction of the spheres.
Correct. That makes sense. On top of that, like what the founding of the first Witcher school was at least 400 or 500 years before Geralt's time. So it's still like 500 years after the conjunction.
Yeah, well, it depends on the timeline, if you're doing book timeline or if you're doing TV series timeline, because they totally move that stuff around. The TV series was like 1,200 years before the current time period.
I'm pretty sure isn't that accurate? Someone accurate?
I think it's only like 800 or 900 to the way the books describe it.
Yeah, I think it hits like 700-800.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's shorter.
So I'm kind of with Ben on this one, where like if I was to propose a prequel series, I kind of think of Nightmare of the Wolf, like where Vesemir, like he gets turned into the Witcher and stuff. Like we see him as his childhood and like what leads to him becoming a Witcher, but then it flashes through that quick montage of like him getting the coins rained down on him, and he's like, even though he's still a Witcher, he's like kind of a celebrity, sort of like he's super successful. I think turning that little montage into a series, especially if it's just going to be a mini series, and seeing that in live action probably would have been kind of cool, like having the adventures of him being like in the prime of his Witcher career, but then also maybe with some flashbacks of him as a kid, like kind of going through and training and stuff.
Yeah, it occurs to me that there might be a reason why, even though that animated series does break from the lore in certain ways, that still worked better was because it felt true to the themes and the tone of what we know about the Witcher universe. You have a character who goes through a character arc. So he's this cocky young guy. He only wants coin, but then he comes out of the other side and ends up doing things for a more fundamentally good reason. You've got that development. You have tragedy. You have all of these things that work the same way, very similarly to the stories that we know about Geralt. But you go to Blood Origin, and the format of that story is just all over the place. It doesn't really tell. It's not in the same spirit of those other stories. What do you guys think? Do you think that's accurate? Jen, did you watch the animated series? You saw that one, right?
No, I did not watch the Vesemir Tales. No. I plan on it, but anime is not generally my thing, so it'll take a lot for me to watch an animated series.
Yeah, no, I get you. I get you.
It's an animated movie. It's just like one.
It's just a movie.
Oh, it's a
movie. Yeah,
it's pretty quick.
And honestly, you would like the look of Vesemir. Just saying,
because he's a handsome guy. Well, yeah.
All right.
Yeah, there's some.
Just think Geralt, but younger.
Yeah, you got that. All right, so Jen, speaking of you, what do you think about like a prequel series? Do you think that this would have been a good time frame and just would have done something different, or would you have picked a different time period?
I like the idea of prequel series, especially if it builds onto the story that I already love. You know, if it had been what do we know about the dwarf before he meets up with Geralt? Not much. What do we know about a lot of the side characters from the books and from the lore and even from the games that we all know and like, but we just don't know a whole lot about their history. I think it definitely could have been another major player side character to learn more about. Just
a little bit earlier in the timeline rather than 12 right. centuries.
Don't go back to the very beginnings.
Plus, to add on to that, I would think if they would have done something like that with elves and dwarves and all like the different races, not have witchers. Be in the Witcher universe, but like don't have a witcher as a main protagonist or something to do with the story to diverge from it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, we can see like Makahan in its like glory before like it's like basically in ruins at this point.
Right. Yeah, you could go back to that time period. You could even follow characters like Zoltan, or like any of these other like Jen was saying, these side characters. Or I mean, who knows? I mean, you could have had we call him Dandelion because of the other stories, but what's his name? Jaskier.
Jaskier.
You could have had like
Jaskier.
a little Jaskier mini series where he goes off and gets into some sort of crazy trouble without Geralt, and how does he survive? And then certain other characters show up, and it could have had the wacky adventures of Dandelion or something like that. That could have been a thing. So yeah, there's a lot of other variety of options here. Crow?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, like, I do kind of like expanding on Jen's idea a little bit, where we could have a whole separate series that like could potentially run like parallel to the main Witcher series, where it does explore Yarp. Like it could be just an episode to episode thing instead of like an overarching story, where maybe one episode we focus on what Yarpen's doing. It could introduce Zoltan. We could get introduced to Shani, like all these other characters. And then that could just be kind of an introduction to them for them to eventually be brought into the main series.
Yeah.
I'd watch that just because of the love for the characters I already have and seeing what they're doing that's not tied directly to Geralt.
And there's a lot of really cool characters that show up across the stories. I mean, like you could go even further afield and end up with some really cool, like what if you had a series that was based on a vampire, right? Like the vampire's perspective as the main character, right? Like totally could be a possibility, because we know there are some quote unquote not necessarily that evil vampires out in the world, that do different things.
Just have an entire side series of just Regis.
Right. I mean, you could do Regis. There's a few others you could pick. You could pick these characters that are like the point of view of a monster that's not really a monster. That's kind of, but again, that feels very much more true to the spirit of The Witcher, because that's how people view Witchers, is as monsters in themselves that slay other monsters, and they're not really human or whatever, right? They're kind of different. They're treated differently. So why not take on the perspective of another monster that's also not really a monster? That's probably more human than most of the humans. That could totally be a thing.
Would make me. Oh yeah, that definitely makes me think of definitely a perspective you could do is, I don't know if anybody here has watched the Being Human series. Mm-hmm. I've kind of been rewatching it. So the premise sounds like the start of a bad joke. It's a werewolf, a vampire, and a ghost all living together in a house. But anyway, the vampire character, he's trying to, because it's more classic vampire where they have to drink blood to survive. So he works at a hospital. He's trying to drink, donated blood so he doesn't attack anybody. And he's keeping himself out of the vampire politics and stuff while trying to live a normal kind of human life. And so I think that'd be kind of a cool perspective is, maybe having a higher vampire that doesn't have to kill to survive. So blood could just play as kind of a taboo element into it, but not only him trying to survive kind of like Regis among the humans and semi-normal life, but not only happen to try and avoid other higher vampires, but then also you could paint the Witcher, certain just unnamed Witcher characters, as sort of like a bad guy, like a bounty hunter or something that's trying to get after him just because he's a vampire.
Or another Witcher.
Yeah.
It could be absolutely. You could play that stuff up really, really well. What do you think, Toasty? I've been doing all the talking. What do you think about this? What do you think about a Regis spinoff?
I mean, Toasty the individual is probably going to watch any vampire spinoff from a series that I like. So,
but do you think outside of just yourself that it would work as a series for other people? That it would be a good idea?
I mean, I think a lot of people generally do like these stories for how the characters that we see and grow to love and stuff. So probably, and it's an interesting perspective. So my brain is tired.
Okay, all right. Well, tell you what, we'll give your brain a break. We'll go thank our patrons. We'll take our mid break, and then I've got some other questions for you guys. So be ready for that. We'll be right back.
Very well. Let us get this over with. Something has infested my vineyard.
Mm-hmm. Great. Let me go prepare my something oil then.
All right, this is the part of the show where we get to thank our patrons. So these guys and our other patrons as well, all 16 of our current patrons, thank you so much for your support. Also, we got to shout out our higher vampires, Ben of Temeria, who's here with us, and Jared M. Thank you so much for your support as well. We don't have anybody new this week to shout out, but if you do sign up, we'll call your name out on the show, and you'll be able to get ad-free episodes. Join us on future episodes like this. It all depends on which tier you sign up for. So head over to patreon.com/Witcher Lorecast. Check out all the different tiers, all the different stuff, and see if you'd like to help us support us. All of a sudden my sentences just don't work all of a sudden. But moving on, we also would love if you would help us out with some reviews on Apple Podcasts. So if you give us a 5-star review, we'll read that out on a future episode of the show. You're also welcome to rate us on Spotify or anywhere else that you listen to us, and we'll be very appreciative, because all of that stuff helps way more than you'll ever know. So thank you to everybody for all of your support, and to all of our patrons. You guys make this possible. And now time to get back to the show.
You smell of death and destiny, heroics and heartbreak.
It's onion.
Right, yeah.
Yeah, Dantron in chat asks, how much is there truth behind the Witchers originating from elves? Yeah, there's nothing in the books about that, as far as we know. Crow, you raising your hand? You want to chime in?
Yeah, I just want to throw this out real quick before we get to whatever we got in store for the second half of the show. Just the fact that we've been spitballing for like good 20-25 minutes and coming up with all these much more interesting ideas, and then the fact that Blood Origins is what we got is kind of sad on a certain level.
Yeah,
we're not creative individuals, but we're also not the ones in charge.
We're also not the ones that have to get paid. Who are getting paid for this. We're also not having to write out the entire series. Like, it's one thing to come up with a concept; it's another to be able to flesh it out completely. So,
dialogue writing is the most frustrating thing you will come across.
It's difficult. Yeah, like being a writer is hard work. So, I do on some level, I do feel for them. I'm like, I don't think it was a terrible idea to do a show about the conjunction of the spheres and how monsters came into this world and where humans came from and all of that stuff. That sounds like a cool concept. The delivery of it just wasn't super great. It just felt kind of like a fan fiction more than an actual full-fledged, Netflix series, right? So that's kind of the tough part there. One of the other things that happens in Blood Origin is we get what, 2 monsters? We see 2 monsters, I believe. There's the big one. There's a real big one that shoots the funny laser beams out of its tentacle things.
The beast.
And then there's the centipede, the giant centipede thing, right? Neither of which actually match any of the monsters that we know from lore.
We got giant centipedes.
We get centipedes.
Okay, the giant centipede, but Scolopendromorphs. But it looks very different from any of the ones that we've seen. It's different. It's weird.
I'm not against it looking different because, just like everyone else, like monsters evolve to their environments. That thing was obviously on a very like wet aquatic planet and was a water-based one. Like, all of that can be explained away with that. Like, centipede doesn't really make me angry. The other thing,
whatever the beast is, the giant thing.
That's what I have to say. The other thing.
Right. So if you guys were to have, like, and for those of you who haven't seen this yet, the big bad magic guy pulls into the continent through a portal a giant monster that does his bidding for him in order to kill his adversaries and all of that, and then protect the castle or something, which just flies around. Instead of inventing some just wacky thing that shoots laser beams at stuff and has multiple tentacles, is there a creature we already know about that you would have gone to instead? Like, if he had the power to control a monster, why not? Why go with something that's completely made up when you could reference back to even something that we've seen in the first 2 seasons of The Witcher and be like, oh, maybe it's an even more giant version of something we've seen before. And so that's terrifying because we saw how Geralt had a hard time fighting that thing. And now they have to deal with this. How are they going to do it? What would you guys do if you could pull in a monster?
Geralt had trouble fighting monsters.
Well, he gets hit and knocked down and looks like he's about to be eaten and
he
things.
Almost one-shot everything.
Yeah, he kind of obliterates stuff. But there are times where he honestly, there are moments where his sword goes away and he's like, he's whatever. Like he can't get to his sword and that kind of stuff.
Honestly, if they could have brought any monster onto the small screen with the series, it should have been the Fiend.
The Fiend.
I was going to say the exact same thing.
Okay, so why the Fiend?
Fiend. Well, it's iconic. It's like they use it on all the promos for a lot of the books and for the games itself. Mm-hmm. And on top of that, the Fiend is terrifying because of its third eye. Because, it can cause illusions. It can cause complete darkness. Anybody would have, who is not a Witcher would have complete, they would just die.
And it totally could have worked into the storyline because the Fiend could have shown up. It would have hypnotized or just put everybody who was at that assembly in darkness and then offed them all individually while they're all panicking, right? Mm-hmm. You don't need laser beams coming out of the eyes. And then if you have an elf dude who turned into some sort of Witcher thing, maybe it doesn't affect him the same way because he's not a human anymore, right? And now he's able to actually fight it on its own terms, and you don't have to throw a gigantic stone sword at it in the sky or whatever. I think you might be onto something, Ben. What do you guys think? Crow? Jen? What do you think? Fiend? Do you have another
I definitely
monster?
had something else in mind, but Fiend is like 10 times better. I think that for any series, again, I haven't watched it, but for any series, a giant minotaur cow thing with psychic powers is always going to like be the best final boss.
Okay. Jen, what do you think? You think Fiend, or do you have another idea?
No, I really like the Fiend. As soon as you were asking these questions, I was like, well, you know what? In defense of the show, and I'm just going to play devil's advocate for the rest of the night because I can.
Sure, why not?
I'll go back to the same thing, that this is so far in the past that of course the monsters look different. They haven't evolved to where they are now. So it's whatever monsters they created, maybe they're the great granddaddy of the ones that we see now.
Yeah, I don't know what this beast thing is the great granddaddy of. It doesn't really match anything.
This thing is not a monster. It's an alien. It's a really bad, like, 80s alien. It honestly.
Or like a 60s B movie alien, like giant thing with tentacles that shoots laser beams. Like, it is, like, Toasty's right. It's straight out of a B movie. It's
a sci-fi movie villain.
Yeah.
So they pulled it from a different sphere than the one that we're used to seeing the monsters come from?
Yeah, the B movie sphere. the sphere where all the B movie monsters all live.
Yeah, the bad
together.
CGI sphere.
The
that
bad,
one in particular.
CGI monsters. Yeah. I mean, it was the concept of it is like, but then even the CGI for it was very low budget, which is so strange because we know how successful the Witcher shows have been to not put the budget. Like, originally they even were going to do 6 episodes, and then they shortened it to 4. And I think that's because the story didn't work out. It was just boring. So they thought if they could squish it down to 4, they could make it more interesting. At least that's my take on it.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I don't think that worked.
I will.
I don't think it worked either.
I will cede to Jen on this one. Of like, yes, it can be a pre, like big, like great ancestor or whatever. I will like see that. I would be fine with it or whatever. If I could look at this monster and tell you where in the fuck it came from, like what it is the ancestor to, but I can't. I cannot identify a single aspect on this monster that makes any sense to something we know today, except that like it flies. So maybe it's an ancestor to like a flying thing. That's all I can tell you. Like,
yeah, but it's not griffin like, it's not dragon like, it's not. I mean, you can go through the whole list. It's not like any of those other things. What it really feels like is, hey, what would be a lot easier is if we could just make our own monster, so we don't have to abide by the laws of what we know these other monsters are limited by or whatever, when they could have just thought of a fiend like Ben did and it still would have worked out fine. Yeah,
it would have worked out better.
Yeah, it would have worked out better. So there's the whole monster dilemma. I mean, there's also the whole like thing with the elves and the elven society being at its height, and yet everybody is living in squalor and starving. That's a little bit weird. So for those of you who have seen at least an episode of this, Jen, go ahead and chime in. I was going to ask, like, what other things about this would you have changed?
Okay, so the one thing that I would have changed is not have it start with Dandelion or Yaskir.
Mm-hmm.
Because if it is just some random chick telling some random dude the tale of the 7, the fandom can just go, well, that's just not canon. It doesn't matter. So therefore, the series can still be made. You can still have all the fun things that you see going on. But guess what? Who is this lady to tell us anything? So
right.
it just doesn't matter.
Right. You're saying that it ties it to the lore because we've got Dandelion or Yaskir there. Yeah.
Yeah. So take him out of it, and then it doesn't tie to the lore at all, and it can still be its art piece.
See, the really unfortunate part about all this as well is that season 3 is going to come around, and we're going to have to listen to Yaskir sing a song about this damn show because he's going to tell the story of the 7. because of this show, because
you
they
know
tied
what?
him into it.
It's probably going to be the most catchy song he'll have for the season too.
Oh no. Oh boy.
I'm
All right. So at what point, this is a fun question.
Right,
At what point in season 3, like what will be the situation where Jaskier talks about the Blood Origin story or sings the song? Like, is there like a moment where like everybody needs like
dump.
I don't want. I have a feeling I know what's probably what it's going to be, and it's going to do with those flipping spires again or whatever they call the monoliths.
Yeah.
It's going to create one of those, flying laser shooting thing.
Wait, so we're going to see.
Whatever.
Wait. You're saying
that's
that
probably what it's going to happen. That's why they're going to have connect the two. I bet you that's what they're going to do. And then Dandelion's like, oh, I know about that thing. And tell Geralt, hey, this is how you kill it.
So in season 3, they come across one of the monoliths, and then for some reason a portal opens up, and another one of these beast monsters comes out, and Dandelion's like, Geralt, I got this one. I know how to beat it. You just throw a giant stone sword at its face.
God damn it.
Tell me that I'm wrong. That I'm like that's probably what
I'm going to tell you you're wrong, but go ahead. Crow.
Okay.
So what would be just the best way for them to even just slightly tie these shows together is for them to be on their trek that, should take 7 months, but ends up taking 15 minutes. And Dandelion's talking with Geralt, and he just goes, have you ever heard the tale of the seven? And Geralt just goes, shut the hell up. I don't care.
Oh, yes, please. That would be great. That would be absolutely great. Unfortunately, that's not going to happen because I know that they made the song.
So he'll say, let me sing you the song of the seven, Geralt. And he goes, oh, another song. Great. Jen, what do you think will happen? Do you have an idea?
I don't like the fact that Ben's response seems so plausible.
Yeah, I totally think we might get. I mean, we're gonna get weirder and weirder monsters. We've already been getting weird monsters in season 2. They've got like weird monsters coming in that are just like on the boundaries of like connected. Like, oh, it's a scolopendromorph, whatever that is, because we've never actually seen one, right? So they're just kind of making jumps. No, I think you're right. Here's what I was thinking was we end up with like a really, really dark moment for Geralt, and he's just like really doubting, like he loses Ciri and Ciri's off somewhere, he can't find her, something, right? And he's feeling really bad. And then Dandelion's like, listen, Geralt, I'll cheer you up. This is the song of the seven. And then it motivates him to get back up and go back out there. Pick himself up by his bootstraps.
I see. I'm probably giving him too much credit at this point with this one. But my thought on it was that like they're going to start getting into the obviously the more political aspect of things, and like the that whole like the reason with the elves wanting Ciri because now they know that she's elder blood. And they're going to be like pursuing her, is that what the hell just happened?
Got double crow.
We got two crows.
Crow. Oh, now he's back to normal. Okay. All right. Well, weird. Sorry, go on, Toasty.
That was my bad. I started. What?
Yeah,
you said silence.
I just want to join back.
And I was like, no, I was talking, buddy. What are you talking about? No.
No, for me, I made the joke about Geralt telling Jaskier to shut the hell up, and like it lagged, so all of you guys were just staring at the camera saying nothing. And I was like, wow, that joke fell flat.
Wow,
no,
these guys are
I immediately jumped on that. I just want you to know. So don't feel bad. Where was I? No, just basically it was gonna be like here's the lore dump on Lara Doran now, because that's part of it. So like I imagine that this is gonna be when they start getting into the elder blood stuff more intensely, and they're gonna link it back with Jaskier. So who knows?
Yeah, it doesn't look good, does it? Well, we'll keep our hopes up. Maybe things will change. I don't know that they will.
You know what? This is how they make the season 3 better. Just have a game of Gwent.
Just an entire episode where Geralt's like, I really should get back on the path, but do you happen to play Gwent?
Honestly, the whole damn season could be just a different Gwent game each episode, and that's it. And it honestly, it would probably turn out better than what we're expecting to get at this point. So
what if we just have a game show that's like Gwent, hosted by Jaskier, and like people come on the show and compete at Gwent? It'd be like, you remember when poker was like all the rage? Texas Hold'em was like a real big thing on TV, and everyone was like super into it.
Like, they still like show that stuff on
but
TV.
it went through. They still show it, but it went through like this period where it was like super popular and then kind of settled down.
Are you looking at the comments?
Yeah, look at the comments. They'll even ruin Gwent.
God damn. Oh no. Oh man, Gwent tournaments, man. I bet that would be amazing. I'd watch that.
Oh god, not the Fever Dream musical episode.
We have a musical episode. Everybody sings.
That's when we get the Song of the Seven.
Yeah, that's the Song of the Seven. Yeah, there you go.
Funny, you say that. I can totally see that happening just because how the show's been going. Having something with Jaskier, having it,
Oh, like Jaskier gets hit over the head. I
totally see it. I can see it.
And then he just imagines like Geralt singing and dancing. Can you imagine him on the set of, like Henry Cavill on the set, and they're like, and he's like, are you serious? I have to sing and dance. This never happens in the books. And they're like, Henry, just do the scene. He's like, no. And that's why he left.
Season 3 off. Is normally where they put the musical episode in.
Yeah. Could be a thing. Well, guys, any other thoughts on this? We're getting close to the end of the show. Any other thoughts on Blood Origin or what you would have done differently? Or we could even get creative here. How did they not make this mistake again? I think the simple answer is stick to the lore, but they've already gone off that. So, what's the next best thing?
The simple answer, honestly, keep ruining the show so that nobody watches it, and you therefore will not be able to make it anymore. Because that's the path that we're heading towards at this point. That's the only solution, is to hope that eventually it's just, we don't have, not enough people are watching it, and we no longer have the funding to make the show.
And then Netflix sells it to HBO, and then HBO makes it, and it's awesome again.
And it'll be incredible.
And if they redo it, have the CDPR team come in.
Oh my God. Yeah. If you just replaced all the writers with the CDPR writers, they could totally, because they've basically already done this by writing the first 3 Witcher games. They pulled inspiration from the books and they stuck with the lore very well. I mean, they changed some things, but they stuck with it pretty well in order to create their own alternate take on some of those stories. In fact, some of the stories sort of repeat, even though it's later in the timeline. Technically, if you string it together with the books, it doesn't really make sense. But if you took that same concept and did that with the show, it might actually work. Ben's full of these really great ideas tonight. What do you guys think? CDPR, could they fix it?
Yeah, probably. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they could do it.
I mean, didn't they?
Mostly just
was it CDPR in the? Didn't some of the writers from CDPR work on Edgerunners?
I don't know. Did they?
Yeah.
Did they?
Yeah,
separate team. Yeah.
Yeah. Still CDPR.
Not the Witcher team.
No, but CDPR in general.
I mean, they seem to do a good job hiring their writers. You have to give them that, right? Like the stories that they actually show us in the games, the way things play out, even the multiple choices. Even if you make different choices, they all still feel true to the universe. Mm-hmm. It doesn't feel broken. Like, oh, okay, I'm going to do the path where Geralt acts like a white knight because that's what he does in the books. Okay, great. That feels right. But if you don't do that, it still fits. It just feels like a different take. So, all right, CDPR, if you're listening, go get jobs at Netflix. Netflix, if you're listening, hire them. But then we'll get the next Witcher game will get delayed. Is that worth it?
Which one?
All of them.
There's 3.
Well, the ones that they're working on in-house. The main one.
So, I mean, they're technically all in-house.
Aren't they separate teams? Isn't there like one of them that
they're all separate teams, but they're all CDPR.
Yeah. I feel like they hired other. Yeah, I don't know. We can get into we'll have to look that up. All right. Well, I think that's going to do it for the episode. You guys have any other last minute thoughts on this? Nothing else? All right. Well, guys, thank you for joining us. I'm glad you guys were here. You had some really cool insights into how to make something not as terrible. Ben, let's start with you. Ben, you got anything else going on you want to share, or ways people can reach out?
Of course, you can find me on Twitter and the Robots Radio at Ben of Temeria. You will also find me on Twitch at Ben of Temeria, where I will stream both of my shows, the Holocron History, Star Wars Canon versus Legends, to where we take a deep dive into the Star Wars lore, and my other show, the Wizarding World Lorecast, to where we take a deep dive in all things Wizarding World and Harry Potter. And with the new game coming out next week, expect me to probably start streaming it more.
Awesome. Yeah, go check that stuff out. Thanks, Ben. Jen, you're up.
Hi.
Hey.
I too have 2 shows on the network. I am one half of the 2 Girls, One Ship podcast, where we analyze, rate, and review all that the world of video game romances has to offer. And you can also find me on the Cyberpunk Lorecast with my co-host Toasty, where we explore the foundations of the past, the state of Night City today, and the news of the future for all things cyberpunk.
Awesome. Yeah, all of those shows you can check out at robotsradio.net. So if you are like, well, where are the names of the shows again? Just go to the website, scroll around, you'll find them. They're right there. You click on them and go listen to them. Well, thanks for joining us, Jen. Crow, you got anything else going on? Anything you want to share?
Well, for the last 10 or 15 minutes, I've definitely just been here in spirit because my internet is unstable at the moment. Been trying to do my best, but yeah, nothing too much. Still staying a fly guy. I'm Crow of Velen in the Discord, and one last little sign off is I think we should get a Witcher dating show so we can get back to the topic of banging monsters.
Like a dating monsters show? Like you're pairing people up with monsters to go on dates?
It's all fair game.
Oh, weird. That's also part of Yaskir's fever dream in the song episode.
Just have Genesis do with that.
I was going to say, Crow, just DM me after the show. We'll see what we can do.
You start with vampires and then you move further and further away from humans until you end up with just who knows what. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, Crow. Toasty, what you got going on?
Well, like Jen said, I am co-host on the Cyberpunk Lorecast, and I also do the Cyberpunk Red live play podcast, Cyberpunk apostrophe D, if you're into stuff like that. So
yeah, go check that stuff out too. And all that stuff can be found at robotsradio.net, my other shows as well. So if you're into all sorts of different lore stuff, just go check stuff out if you're looking for more shows. Lots of great stuff on the network. And thank you everybody for joining us. This has been super fun. We will see our patrons again at the end of next month, but we will see all of you guys in chat. Thank you for being here in next week. So come join us again next Monday. We'll be earlier. We do these shows with our patrons later in the evening so that more people have a chance to join us. But Toasty and I will be back probably around 4 or 5 o'clock on Monday next week. So we'll see you then. And until then,
stay safe on the path.
We'll see you guys later. Bye, everybody. Thanks for tuning into the Witcher Lorecast. We'd love to hear about your experiences with the games and the books and the TV series and all your thoughts on everything. Please check out the Robots Radio Discord and follow us on Twitter at Witcher Lorecast.
You've been listening to a Robots Radio podcast. Smart shows for interesting people. Check out all the shows at robotsradio.net.